Ford is a master at writing passing characters who we only spend a few moments with, but sometimes end up being the most memorable of the book. Hello everyone, welcome to Read the Right Thing Book Reviews. I'm Eric, thanks so much for tuning in. It's been a while, so welcome back. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas. Now, I've reviewed Richard Ford in the past. Richard Ford is an American author of novels and short stories. Richard Ford is most famous for his Frank Bascombe books, but he's also known for a few other collections of short stories and also a novel named Wildlife, which was adapted into a film by Paul Dano. Ford was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Paris Review in 2020. And Bruce Springsteen presented him with this award. However, there was some controversy surrounding this award. Many authors questioned this choice, not necessarily because of Ford's writing ability, but more because he's a straight white male and a person of color or a woman wasn't chosen. And also, Ford is known to be quite the fiery person. He's had some controversy surround him in the past. He spit in Colson Whitehead's face after Colson Whitehead wrote a negative review about one of his books, and that only stoked the fire of the controversy. Lay of the Land is the third book in the Frank Bascombe series. This was originally a trilogy, but he's since written a fourth book. Frank is a classic, all-American type suburban character. He's not intended to be an everyman, but he'll still serve that role for many readers. In a feature for bookworm.com, Ford wrote that he abides by E.M. Forster's dictum that says fictional characters should possess the incalculability of life, meaning characters should be just as unpredictable and obscure as people we meet every day. So just because Frank is a middle-class white Democrat from New Jersey, he should be unexpected. You shouldn't know exactly how he would react to any given situation. It doesn't mean we know exactly what he should do or should say. Each of these novels is deliberately set in the days leading up to a holiday. The Sports Writer was set during Easter, Independence Day was during the 4th of July, and now Lay of the Land is set up to the days and the day of Thanksgiving. Ford said in a podcast that he likes to choose a holiday backdrop because the reader already has a plethora of memories and associations with these holidays. There are also communal American feelings to these holidays, both good and bad, and almost all Americans collectively share these feelings towards specific holidays. I think about my own associations with Thanksgiving. It's a time spent with friends or family. It's usually more low-key than Christmas. It's a little more laid back. It's very much a holiday that wants to be spent relaxing inside. If you were young, you might play a quick turkey bowl flag football game, eat a big meal, then just relax and watch TV, watch a movie, or watch football. It's a holiday that really shouldn't have any other events besides a big meal with a nice juicy turkey. But then there's also this inevitability of spending time with unwanted extended friends and possibly family members. People you are glad to say hi to, but don't really want to sit down to share a meal with and a day with. The first two Frank Bascombe books are set roughly 10 years apart, and now Lay of the Land only happens a few years after Independence Day. A New York Times book review said this about the book: "This novel showcases many of Mr. Ford's gifts. His ability to capture the nubby, variegated texture of ordinary life, his unerring ear for how ordinary people talk, his talent for conjuring up subsidiary characters with a handful of brilliant brushstrokes." Frank's story continues to be so ordinary that it's amazing Ford can devote a 500-page book to it. But he makes the ordinary so humorous and interesting. I was and still am devoted to this character of Frank Bascombe, and I would gladly pick up another 500-page book about him. In Lay of the Land, it's now late 2000, in the middle of the heated Bush-Gore election. Frank has moved to a Jersey shore town called Seacliff, but he still goes back occasionally to the now frenzied Haddam. And Ford himself actually moved to the Jersey Shore in the 90s after having lived in Paris. The shore has a sense of drama and transience that drew the author there. While many people vacation there, Frank lives there permanently with a few other neighbors. Frank owns a successful real estate business and employs a Tibetan Buddhist named Mike Mahoney. The otherness of this immigrant Mike and his attempts at becoming more American of course offered Frank many chances to comment on the nature of immigrants and Americans commingling. Mike has carved out sort of an American personality while still using his Tibetanness and otherness to be a great realtor. And Mike's name isn't even really Mike. This is just the Irish name that some old coworkers gave him because his original name was too hard to pronounce. Frank says in a part of the book about Mike, he has, in fact, become a full-blooded, naturalized American at the courthouse in Newark with 400 others. Still, it's easy to picture him in a magenta robe and sandals, sporting a yellow horn hat and blowing a ceremonial trumpet off the craggy side of Mount Kamalanga, which is often how I think of him, though he never did it. You'd be right to say I never in 100 years expected to have a Tibetan as my realty associate, and that New Jersey homebuyers might turn skittish at the idea. But at least about the second of these, what might be true is not. Mike is considering going into the real estate development business and brings Frank along in the beginning of the book to get a feel for a possible future business partner and business venture. The forces of life pressing against Frank continue to be his divorce with Anne, pain in the ass children, and prostate cancer that left him with a bunch of radioactive BBs up his ass, and the urge to piss often. And Anne, Frank's first wife, only complicates things when she meets up with him to tell him he's a kind man, she absolutely loves him, and wants to move back in with him. Frank reluctantly invites her to Thanksgiving and hilariously regrets it immediately after. The main theme of the book, uttered multiple times by Frank and other passing characters, is that life is strange. Frank's own life has taken strange twists and turns. All he can really do is exist, embrace, and become. Frank married Sally, his girlfriend from Independence Day, but she has left him to pursue a relationship with her first husband, Wally, who showed up after 30 years unexpectedly. Wally is mentioned in Independence Day. One day he just went missing, and after years, Sally figured that he was dead, so she pronounced him dead. Strangely, Wally reappears after having lived in Europe for 30 years, and Sally decides to give him another try. It's really strange. There's this whole strange encounter where Wally comes and lives with Frank and Sally at the same time just to kind of see what's going on, just to kind of rekindle some form of relationship. And it's obviously very weird for Frank. The children still confuse Frank, and they also really annoy me, especially Paul. In a podcast, Ford says the characters in these books that most resembles himself is actually Paul. I'm sure that will come as a shock to readers expecting that answer to be Frank. Frank's children are now adults. Clarissa honestly has never rubbed me the wrong way, but Paul has throughout the stories. Even as an adult, he still acts childish. Paul lives in Kansas City and works for Hallmark writing greeting cards. Paul is as strange as ever and shows up with a girl who has a missing hand. And the girl seems sweet enough, but Paul is still childish and annoying. Now, Paul has dealt with divorced parents and a sibling dying, so maybe I should cut him a break. Clarissa is now a lesbian and trying to fuse a more meaningful relationship with Frank now that he has cancer. Frank is grateful for her availability and care, but he remarks in his mind that she is doing it more for her than him. The exact kind of depressing, funny, but probably true interior dialogue that we come to know with Frank. I think that Frank is at his most vulnerable and emotional in this book, obviously brought on from his age and this cancer. Throughout the book, Frank feels a desire to connect and become with his surroundings and others. He's now joined a sponsor line where he offers people anything they need. Usually it's just to talk or answer a simple question, or fix something easy around the house like a light bulb. The sponsor line's main purpose is to offer plain, low-impact, good counsel and assistance. So how it works is Frank will get a call and he'll go to someone's house and just talk to them for about 30-45 minutes. I find it interesting that Frank often seeks these groups out. And although he probably wouldn't admit it, I think it's to stay connected to people. Frank, after all, knows what it is like to feel dismal and friendless. From book one, he's participated in groups like divorced men's clubs and also carried out other odd friendships. In this book, we see he's maintained a friendship with Wade Arcanault, the father of Vicky Arcanault, who was the girlfriend from the sports writer. The two have formed a bond over watching the destruction of Jersey Shore buildings. I think Frank really benefits from these interactions, even though he might speak of them like they are unnecessary and something he does to benefit others. Frank feels very much detached from the bigger picture of America and his own existence. Things like politics, the election, and still making sense of his son's death loom over him. But on the smaller, local scale, I think he's very attached. He's very involved. He's always going somewhere or meeting someone either through friendships, groups, or his real estate business. He runs a thriving business and works with a handful of different people. Although we didn't hear about the root beer stand from Independence Day. I wondered what happened with that and the guy who was running it. The main draw of these books is, of course, Frank's interior dialogue and thoughts. He thinks about a lot of different things throughout these books. Richard Ford said something funny that nobody thinks about things as much as Frank, and if they did, they would be put in the nut house. I mentioned how Frank is at his most vulnerable in this book. Age has not been too kind to Frank, even though he's only 55. He's still trying to make sense of his past and piece together his future. As we know, Frank feels compelled to define periods of his life, as if this will give him some form of control. He's dubbed this part of his life the permanent period. Much of his life is behind him, and not a lot seems to be in front of him. The bulk of his mistakes, he hopes, are behind him, and he wants to just live the rest of his days peacefully. Several times on this book, he contemplates how others will think of him when he dies, or whether they will think anything at all. He questions how he can leave a lasting impression, and whether people will care when he's gone. There's a section where he writes about how others will view you when you die and what they'll possibly say. But given how I was conducting life, staying offshore, waiting for the extra beat, I realized I could die and no one would remember me for anything. Oh, that guy? Frank? Yeah, that was me. And not that I wanted to blaze my initials forever into history's oak. I just wanted that when I was no more, someone could say my name, my children, my ex-wife, and someone else could then say, right, that Bascombe, he was always damn blank. Or, old Frank, he really likes to blank. Or worst case, Jesus Christ, that Bascombe, I'm glad to see the end of his sorry blank. Those blanks would all be human traits I knew about and others did too, and that I got credit for, even if they weren't heroic or particularly essential. Frank also says this about the permanent period. A lot of life is just plain wrong, and the older I get, the more clearly and often wrong it seems. And all you can do about it, which is what Clarissa is trying to prevision, is just start getting used to it. Start selecting amazement over bewilderment. This whole subject, you might say, is just another version of fear of dying. But my bet is 80% of divorced people feel this way, bewildered yet possibly also amazed by life, and go on filling it until the heavy draperies close. The permanent period is, of course, the antidote. The most enjoyable moments for me, besides Frank's interior dialogue, are Frank's interactions with random people. In this book alone, he gets banged up in a bar fight, goes to another lesbian bar and cries in front of a bartender, and meets some other random people while doing his job as a realtor. Ford is a master at writing passing characters who we only spend a few moments with, but sometimes end up being the most memorable of the book. Frank is also still processing the death of his son, and some of the saddest scenes come in this book. He was sitting in a lesbian bar reading a magazine, and he read an ad for a family about one of their sons dying, and he was immediately brought back to his own son dying years ago. Something between the events of the day and him seeing that ad and thinking about his own son just shed off a lot of tears, and he began to cry in this bar. And I don't recall ever seeing Frank shed tears over the death of his son, or really anything. It was sort of a random, unexpected, yet beautiful place to see Frank go through this. Most of the events of his life are just in everyday American places. The big events, the small events, the happy events, the sad events are all just in these American settings. I think the ending of this book is more climactic and unexpected than the other two. And I think the book can be summed up, like I said, how the character said it, and the main theme is that life really is just strange. That was my review on Lay of the Land by Richard Ford. I hope you found this review helpful. Maybe you're writing a paper or you need it for a class, or you just really enjoy Richard Ford and you enjoy these American novels. So this book was definitely the right thing for me. I've really loved Richard Ford. I would recommend this book. Let me know what you thought about this book in the comments. Let me know if I missed anything or if you had a different take on the book. I would love to hear those comments. And once again, always read the right thing.